how you approach process improvement.
Yeah. Well, the that we approach process improvement is really leveraging the Lean Six Sigma framework. And a lot of people for Lean Six Sigma, usually they heard about it in school. You think about, manufacturing and things like that. Um, but they're also sometimes surprised that you can apply that framework to professional services. But really, it's looking at the steps that you take to meet an objective or create and deliver any type of deliverable, and then using Lean Six Sigma to really identify the areas of waste. We like to call those the areas of opportunity, and then just removing those from the process and making things much more efficient. So Lean and Six Sigma are really two different things. And when we think about lean, something being very lean, it's about being efficient. So it's about moving things forward through the process as quickly as possible, not looping back, not slowing down, but just getting it through there as efficiently and as quickly as possible. So when we think about lean, I always encourage people to think about velocity. And through efficiency, you can create velocity. Six Sigma is more about quality. So if we're stopping and we're building quality in from the very beginning of the process, no matter what process that is, then your deliverable at the end is going to be higher quality as well. So quality is what we think of when we think of Six Sigma, velocity or efficiency when we think of lean. And when you put those two things together, they're going to create more capacity. And that's what we're going for in public accounting firms, is building capacity through process improvement.
I think it's really powerful in the sense of often what you'll hear is our concern, to achieve efficiency, quality is going to be the lever that might be deterrent. Does efficiency mean cutting corners or doing things in a less rigorous way? But what you're describing there with the two elements of Lean Six Sigma is almost an eye to achieving efficiencies while simultaneously improving quality of the process. Is that a good way of thinking, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because think about things that will impact quality in a public accounting firm. And those are the things that aren't lean, the things that are slowing you down. So when you are waiting for your client to respond or waiting for information from your client, a lot of times firms think, well, I got a few documents in. I know a little bit about this tax return. I can get it part of the way there and then I'll stop. Well, when we stop, that's impacting our quality because that pick up and put down is going to create, learning curves, and that's going to impact the quality. So if you do actually put lean and Six Sigma together, then you're going to have that velocity and that quality together. So we call it managing the front door. So best practice, Mark, is not actually starting a tax return until you have enough information from your client to finish that tax return. We call it the two-touch rule. So you pick it up, you do as much as you can, you get it almost finished. Of course, you have your back and talk to the client. So you shouldn't have to do that more than twice. You shouldn't have to touch that tax return on average more than twice. So if you are holding things in the beginning, which is counter to what we really think, if you hold them until you have enough to actually do a good quality job and create a quality deliverable, then you're going to be efficient. So you're going to be lean and you're going to have high quality as well.
That really resonates because from an audit perspective, we'll often see as well, some of the information is ready from the client, but maybe the numbers are still moving. We haven't closed the ledgers. There's a trial balance exists, but it's not really the final one. And firms will often face that dilemma of, well, there's some information there, but it's not probably the most efficient point to start the work. Yet they've got the resource booked this week to work on this particular engagement. So a lot of managers or people who are looking at this work will be like, well, I'd ideally push this out a week and start when the client's ready, but I'm now going to lose all of my resources booked on the planner because they need to go and do a different engagement next week or the week after, if you like. So how does some of this play into the way that you think about resource management?
Yeah, very good question. So you have to back up even further. You knew that you had those resources available long before sat down and made that decision and looked and said, well, we don't have enough, but we've got some. So if you put more effort into the process even before that and getting that information from the client, then you're going to be able to leverage those resources. If not, then reallocate them somewhere else. But you shouldn't be sitting down and saying, okay, this is the week that we have our resources, so we have to get something done this week. That should have been done long before. And it's another thing that you want to consider in process improvement is if you are looking at just part of a process, you can think, well, I know I have a bottleneck here. Let me remove this bottleneck. But you're not looking at truly the whole process, then you're actually going to create more bottlenecks and more waste in the process because you're not looking at the entire thing. So with your question and your example, I would recommend even backing up further and look at the beginning of the process and set some milestones, some toll gates. We can't have the resources if we don't have this information. Set those deadlines, work with your client, because that way you're using your client as a team member as well, and you need to manage them early in the process also and bring them more into it also.
I think there's definitely that one of the final points you shared there around that client, bringing them in as part of the process. We see that through some technologies around client collaboration portals, etc. But it's way more than that. It's around actually the client understanding the implications of, well, if you're 3 days late delivering the information that we're expecting at this time, what are the implications? My experience, the clients would expect you to still work with this harsh on information or this. It's fine, it doesn't matter to you. It's 2 days, 3 days late. And what I found was very beneficial in my days of public accounting was actually making sure the client understood the implications of this, the downsides from a efficiency and effectiveness point, and also, sometimes you actually pay into the fees as well. You are going to be late. We're going to structure the fees in this way. So, and you've touched on tax, I'm touching on audit, but when we think about CPA firms, public accounting firms, where do you feel are some of the biggest areas of opportunity in your experience for firms to achieve benefits from Lean Six Sigma or general process improvement?
Yeah. The quick and easy answer is anywhere in the firm, but of course. But what we are seeing right now, and what we've been seeing for probably the last decade, has been really that focus on those compliance areas, on tax, on audit. We've seen some in CAS as well, some back office. So we've done projects with firms on like their billing and invoicing process. But I think that firms are really focused on the compliance processes right now because they are trying to get those as efficient as possible. And, often it's not because they just want to do more compliance. It goes back to that capacity. So they know that their clients, don't necessarily want a tax return, or financial statements or audits, but they have to have them. So that is, that's your compliance work. That's the work that that is, I won't say that it's easy work, but it's the work that your clients have to have. What firms really are looking for is how do you make the things that they have to have, the clients have to have, as efficient as possible so they can build that capacity to do more of the things that the clients want to have. Because those are the things that they're actually paying more for, are the things that bring more value. So the consulting, the advisory areas, we've seen firms start to do Lean Six Sigma projects for their clients, build capacity so that you can do those things. Do a lot of firms, do your tax return. So I'm going to throw in tax planning. If you can actually provide more value through tax planning, we should flip the script and we should be actually charging what brings the value. So more of the consulting and the planning, and then throw in the compliance pieces, as that add-on. And the profession's been doing that backwards for a very long time.
One thing you said that really stood out to me is, and I've said this for a while around digital transformation, and I think it applies here in the same sense. If as a firm you're able to embrace these concepts, digital transformation, Lean Six Sigma, apply them in your business, I think that one of the hidden opportunities when we talk about advisory opportunities for firms is actually to then go and take those lessons and those learnings and help their clients with them.
Absolutely.
And I think that advisory service feels a lot more relevant if you've lived and breathed that yourself. I like to use the kind of juxtaposition of saying, well, how can you go and talk about exciting cyber security advisory services or other really digital opportunities, and you're using a desktop-based tool for your audit process? There's not congruence there between your compliance services and your advisory services. A lot of firms see exciting growth opportunity in advisory, but I feel that doing better compliance actually leads them towards some of those opportunities. And this feels like another area that if they got really good at it, they would be able to take some of those learnings and apply them to their clients.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge opportunity, whether it's the process improvement or things like strategic planning for their clients. You already have the relationship. They already trust you because you are doing those compliance services for them. So absolutely add, more advisory services, add more relationship and more trust, because we've been hearing this for a long time too. And we're not just CPAs, we're business advisors. We are business people. So yes, you can advise your clients on many areas, not just the accounting areas of their business.
I agree, and I think it's overstated, the whole rush to advisory piece. What I like about this is it's coming from a compliance base. It's coming from how do we get good at the core services that public accounting firms are delivering day in, day out. There are huge growth opportunities in audit, tax right now, but how can that start to feed some of the other areas that are relevant? I talk quite a bit around and what I call the 3 H's, so people, process, and platforms. We've touched a little bit there on people and some of the things that are impacted, but just looking at that piece around technology and process, one of those where some people debate, is it the chicken or the egg that comes first? What's your view on technology and process improvement and the interplay between the two of them?
It's more of a breakfast scramble. You can eat them all together, because you do have to look at them together. When I really started focusing on process improvement about 6.5 years ago, one of the reasons I did is because we were having so many conversations about technology, about I would call my first background. And we were having this conversation about technology, but they felt like conversations about process. Or we're talking about process, I'm like, well, there's a lot of technology in here. And we just couldn't ignore how integrated these things are. So you have to look at them together. We many times see new technologies be implemented, and then people are like, well, I want it to do X, Y, Z because my old system did it like this. Like, well, you can't have your old process and put it into your new technology. You can just shoehorn it in there. You're not going to really get all the benefits of this new technology, which was the point. You wanted benefits from this new technology. So you have to look at process. And anytime we're looking at a process, doing a process improvement project, we're looking at how can we leverage technology to add that efficiency and to add that quality. How can we leverage that technology? And you have to look at those two things together. So it's not a chicken or an egg. You have to look at both of them together. If you don't, you're not going to get the efficiencies that you thought you were going to, and you're not going to get the ROI out of the technology that you thought you were really going to. So when I talk to people, I encourage them, look at those two things together, because you can't separate them. You really can't.
Okay. And I'm interested in then how you view, so a lot of firms right now are evaluating their audit methodology, their audit platforms, and they're trying to get away from recognized legacy technologies, embrace some of the core concepts of cloud computing, use of data, etc. And there's different people out there doing that. But how do you think about, if you're trying to think about process and technology together, at what point in this process, let's say you're evaluating the market, there's 4 potential technologies you could move to move to a new methodology, a new technology. At what point are you starting to zero in on one particular technology there? Because it feels to me, as you're talking through that might be quite a difficult one for a firm to work out, is well, the process might depend on the technology, but the technology might depend on what the process I want to follow. So how do I square that circle and narrow in on one particular technology and then get the process and the technology to work? Have you got any advice in that particular area?
Yeah, I would say include people from both sides. So include the people who are most familiar with the process and people from technology. So when we do this, we make sure that we build a cross-functional team. So it's not, the decision makers for the technology aren't just the head of the department or the head of IT. Make sure that when you're evaluating your technology, you actually have, people who, we like to say, no one knows the work like the people doing the work. So make sure you have a cross-functional team, but also make sure you have representation from your technology team so that they can work together. And even like from the very beginning of evaluating those solutions, and I would say back up, even from building the requirements for those solutions, before you even start evaluating them, have that cross-functional team build the requirements, what the firm really has to see and have to have from both a technology and a process perspective. And then you can evaluate those technologies a lot easier and a lot better.
And what role in that interplay between the people doing the work and the technologists, do you see like the vendor's role in that? Because nobody, to your point, nobody knows the work like the people doing the work. Well, I'd hope that nobody knows the technology like the vendor who's built and selling the technology. So how would you consider bringing people from that innovation partner, as I like to call it? I don't like the word vendor, but
Yeah.
how would you consider bringing us, and how important are having really good people available to you from the vendor to be able to actually create the best possible process here?
Yeah. When it comes to, I don't like calling them vendors either. I think we like to call them solution providers or solution partners. I call them innovation partners. But including them from the very beginning as well. And, I talk about building requirements because you want to make sure that the actual technology meets those requirements. But when it comes to that partner that you're looking for, look for the relationship. That is very important because the solution that you pick can technically check every box that you need. It rarely happens. They don't check every box.
There's no perfect solution.
Yeah. But you can say, okay, well, this one checks 90% of the boxes. But if you don't have a good relationship, if that partner doesn't understand how your firm actually does their work, your team, if they can understand your process, then they're not going to be able to help support the integration of their technology that they're providing and your process. So I think it's very important. I wouldn't say if you're looking at 10 or 12 different solutions, maybe don't bring them in at that point. But if you've got it narrowed down to 2 or 3, really focus on building the relationship. Don't just pick the technology and check that box and then try to, cram in the implementation, at the end of the year. So take the time to build the relationship and make sure that that's truly the partner for you. And that goes back to, having the people, because your people, also your partners, your solution providers, they are your people as well. Your clients, your solution providers, people internally on your team, it's all part of your people. And then as you've mentioned, we've got our process and we've got our technology as well. So that triangle is still in effect in that situation.
So it seems to me that from what you're sharing, ideally what you're looking for is people in that solution provider who firstly can interact with the people doing the work. They understand how the audit works at a very detailed level. They've got experience in doing the audit before. They've got people available who can talk to the technologists around the more technical APIs, SSO, all that kind of really important security type areas for core platforms that should be way higher up people's agenda now than has been in the past. Mm-hmm. But also what you're looking for is beyond just those skills of knowledge, experience, domain expertise, you're looking for somebody who actually wants to work with you in this way, wants to achieve success with you, is enthusiastic and passionate about actually getting the technology in and revitalizing the processes and thinking more strategically about this. So it feels to me that that's a shift from what you might have seen as a traditional software vendor of,
Yes.
let's buy some licenses and check you in a year's time for the renewal, to much more of the software as a service type playbook, which is much more around continued innovation, continued iteration, but actually sophisticated implementation to get this up and running, get it working.
Yeah. The word I like to use is you want a partner, you want a solution provider who's going to be curious. They need to be curious about your firm, about your people, about your process, because they have a lot to learn from you, just like you have a lot to learn from them. And the more open they are to learning from you, not only is that going to benefit you, but it's going to benefit the rest of the profession. If your solution provider is curious and they are taking what they learn from you back and they're improving their platform, again, it's going to have that ripple effect in the profession.
I really like the word curious. And the people side then, just pivoting to that slightly, a lot of firms are using outsourcing, offshoring, different setups to try and think again about the talent that they need, and particularly the geographies of that talent. So I know in the US in particular, we have challenges, but the talent pipeline, we've got an aging demographic here, and a lot of firms are looking to moving a lot of the work to other countries, India, Philippines, etc. And for various reasons, not just the economics of it, but also just simply the capacity challenge. How does process improvements maybe interplay with aspirations around moving more work to, should we call it different structures, teams, or different talent structures?
Yeah. Well, if you think about how the work happens internally within a firm, there's a handoff between administrative professionals to your client service professionals. There's handoff, all along the process. And then there's the handoff to the client. Every time you hand something off, there's a different person involved in there. So think about it. If you're handing something off to an outsourced resource or offshore, however, whatever you're using, you have to consider that as part of your process as well. And we have seen some firms who have built a process for their internal users, and then they wonder why there's such a bottleneck when you send things outside of that core team. And they quickly learn that that's an opportunity. You have to, those are part of your team as well. Those people are team members. So you want to include them in your people as well, when you're looking at training and development and those kind of things. And you want to look at how the process is going to impact them as well. So we see a lot of firms as they start their journey for some of those outsourced resources that they have to look at the process also. So it's a really good time to do process improvement.
And it really resonates because when I was at PwC, we had a 4-step mantra, if you like, in a lot of our, I wouldn't necessarily call it Lead Six Sigma. It was just general, let's rip up the rule book and try and make something better here. And our mantra was a 4-step of eliminate, simplify, standardize, and automate. And so I used to like the first one mostly because basically a lot of the time you find audit is my specialist subject. It was very easy for people over the years to keep adding more steps to the process because, hey, there's been this new audit standard, so we've got to do these extra things. And somebody's always got a great idea from a peer review finding or a regulatory inspector. It was really easy, and particularly quality-based people, it's comfortable for them to add more. It's uncomfortable to take things away. And so what you often found was that there was a lot of things that over time, you could actually see duplication of effort, or you could just take something out and there was no impact whatsoever. So love that one because it was basically, I can take something out and I don't even need to worry about it anymore. That's just straight to the bottom line. But then the pieces that were around simplification was really all around, it's taking those like 2 paragraphs to explain a very simple task. Can we explain it in 1 short sentence? Because then junior people can probably do it a lot quicker than somebody who's now having to have more experience to understand what those 2 paragraphs even mean.
Yeah.
Standardization was all about all the partners seem to have their own different preferences as to what the audit file needs to look like, or what the memos need to be, or the color palette that's being used. And it was like, that's completely wasted time. This is not efficient, effective. How do we get this to look and feel consistent? And I think that a lot of people were rushing to the fourth step, which was automate, and trying to automate something that was completely unstandard, that was really more complex than it needed to be, or even worse, they were automating something that didn't even need to be done in the first place. So we used to always try and go through those 3 steps. But as you talk about that, the final step doesn't necessarily need to be automate. It could be to offshore.
Yes.
Either one of those is going to remove that task from your team.
Right.
But those steps in my language, which I'm sure you can translate them into a more scientific Lean Six Sigma approach, is really how I would think about this. And I think that whether it's automation or offshoring, it's got to go through a similar kind of process to get to something that's easier to offshore or automate.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when we start, we do start with eliminating the waste. You talked about simplification, and many times when we're looking at process improvement, we get really excited, and we're like, "Oh, we could do something very complicated. Like, oh, let's automate this piece." We're not there yet. Usually, the most efficient, solution is a simple solution. So start there. Start with being simple. You use the word standardize. We like to use the word, you also used it, consistency. You want your process to be as consistent as possible. If you can standardize it, if it is the exact same every single time, then it is primed to be automated. But we know a lot of our work is not standard. You want to make it as consistent as possible. So, yeah, and we talked about, personal preferences, at the partner level, really at any level. Those things need to be eliminated. We actually encourage people to ask a couple of questions, when it comes to deciding if something's a personal preference. The first one is this making the client money? Is it saving the client money? Is it beneficial to the firm? So is it, making the firm money or saving the firm money? Or is it required by a professional standard? If you can answer yes to those 3 questions, any of those 3 questions, what you're looking at is probably a personal preference. And those are, things that should be eliminated, because yes, you have the option. You can either outsource or automate something depending on what works best. But you have to go through process improvement and have a clean process, not a perfect process. There's no such thing. But you need to have a streamlined, clean process to support that outsourcing or to look for opportunities for automation.
And one thing I'm interested in getting your take on as well around outsourcing, and think it lends to this process side, is there's, in my experience, 2 approaches to outsourcing or offshoring or whatever flavor you're looking at. One is to try and bring additional resources into your team, and you treat those additional resources as additional team members, and they're treated in a very comparable way to anybody else. As in an audit, they allocate certain sections or certain areas, and they're part of the team. And the second piece would be more to create packets of work, if you like, where you go, okay, I'm going to take this particular part, and on every single audit engagement or tax compliance piece of work, I'm going to send that packet of work to somebody else, and then I'll get back the outputs from that packet of work. And in your experience, what are the things that would indicate the right approach of those 2 areas based on process improvement or similar things? How is there an interplay between those things?
I think it's very similar when it comes to the process and process improvement. I think it's really just down to the strategy of the firm. Does the firm want to have and want to extend their team, and do they want to invest in those people and treat them as part of the team? Because you have all the same opportunity, you also have all the same challenges that you would have, just bringing on team members. Or do you want to go the other route and just send things out, have it done, and bring it back? I don't think there's a wrong answer. It depends on the firm. But when it comes to process and process improvement, you need it for either way that you're leaning, either one of those options. You need to really focus on the process. It's that handoff that's very important.
Right. Okay. That's interesting and stuff. So I think there's, people watching this, listening to this, I challenge any firm to think that there isn't some process in their business that could be improved, particularly what I've seen in CPA public accounting firms. So for anyone who's looking to get started in this area and say, oh, if this particular area feels inefficient, how would you recommend somebody get started trying to make, review, consider, improve a process in their business or that?
Yeah. Very good question. And it's a difficult question because sometimes you do need that outside, resource. We help firms with this every day. But I would say really look at which process you think has the most opportunity. There's no such thing as a perfect process, so you can pick any process within your organization to really look at and do process improvement on. But I would say look at where you're going to find the biggest benefit. Have you done it on some of those compliant processes, or where do you feel things are lagging? Where are clients getting frustrated? Where are staff getting frustrated? And then I think that helps guide you to which processes you really want to work on and look at. There's no point in doing process improvement on a process that isn't going to improve either the client experience or the staff experience. So I would look for really the process that you have the largest opportunity to through a process improvement project.
Okay, that's interesting. And then what I've seen as well might be, don't think about a process being the entire audit, because I see some people, like, they'll start this and they'll go, right, what we're going to do is we're going to document everything we do from start to finish in the audit. And to your point, there's a lot of necessary variations across the entire industry. And that I would recommend somebody, adopt the principles of Agile or the Geek Way or any other of the more innovative approaches. Start small, achieve some success quickly, and iterate from there. So don't look at the entire audit process. Maybe look at your process for doing bank confirmations as just a discrete activity where you go, well, have we currently do that? Do we all do that the same way? Because that's a very functional activity. Is there some technology we can use in that particular area? That to me is the areas of like, okay, so if you start small, achieve some quick wins in that particular area, you're probably going to achieve efficiencies. You're probably going to get quality improvements. And then you're going to get also more buy-in from the broader leadership team if you can say within 2 weeks of, here, we've looked at this very small part of the process, we've identified these wins we can get, you're going to get more buy-in to then go, okay, can you do more of that?
Yeah.
Whereas if it takes you a month to just even simply write down on a sheet of paper what we do in this area, that's going to drag your wheels out, I think. So
yeah, we advise people don't boil the ocean. Like you said, don't take the entire process. Many times when we're working with firms and we say, okay, where does the process begin? They're like, oh, well, when the client acceptance. Like, probably, yes, but probably not. And then they'll say, well, the engagement letters. Well, do the engagement letters, does it actually stop any of the other work being done? Maybe it should. A lot of the times the answer is no. So maybe that's not the beginning of our process. So I think you're spot on. You want to pick part of the process and you want to have those guardrails so that you're not boiling the ocean. But you also want to make sure that when you're looking at it, you're looking at enough of the process that you don't create bottlenecks. So again, kind of look at what processes or what things hold up that work moving. Engagement letters, people try to throw those in. We say that's a different process. Same with when you get to the end of the process and they say, well, we need to go through billing because we're not actually done until we get paid for this work. Well, getting the bill doesn't stop, or getting the receivables doesn't actually stop the work from being done. So that's probably a separate part of the process as well, or you can look at it as a separate process. So it is a fine balance between looking at enough and not looking at too much, not boiling the ocean.
So it's almost about understanding, is this a discrete activity that works in isolation, or is this something where there's interplay with other parts of the process where either this part is dependent upon something preceding it, or something that follows is now dependent upon this particular. So I think that's a really great way of thinking about it. If you want to start small, I would thinking maybe those discrete siloed activities, those some really kind of low hanging fruit opportunities to say, well, let's just do this because it doesn't actually impact anything else. So those other ones that have got interplay are going to involve an additional little bit of sophistication to start thinking through and start mapping out the broader interplay in the broader process versus something that's more narrow and discrete.
Yeah, exactly. And I mentioned earlier that when you look at processes to do improvement on, look at things that are going to impact your clients or your staff and have a positive impact on them. If you want to get people really excited about process improvement, improve your billing process, because as people are getting paid faster, they're going to get really excited about process improvement. So those are some different options just to get people started.
That's a fantastic point for us to close. I really appreciate the insights that you shared here today, Amanda. I think there's a lot for people listening to be able to take away.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Mark.